Hello, and welcome to another Jay's Politics Blog podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Network. You can reach us at podcast99.org or me directly at Jay's Politics Podcast at gmail.com or directly on Twitter at JPolyPodcast. And so, today is another This Week in U.S. Politics episode, and it's going to be about the Navy and also about Florida's gun control bill that was passed by their state legislature and signed by Governor Scott. So today, hopefully, I can keep it nice and brief, but also make my points. The joys of doing it live is I gotta figure out my flow, figure out my tempo of how to do things. So I have the chat open. So if you want to pop in and take a look, great. Say hi, whatever. I'm going to start off with the Navy, what I know the best, or one of the jobs that I know the best. And this is actually an article written earlier this week by Mark Faram about the busiest ships, subs, and squadrons and who's really away from home the most. Uh, kind of a breakdown of what we saw earlier, or last summer, basically, with the two ships getting involved in collisions in very busy areas. It was due to a lack of training and a lack of I don't want to say R&R, but they didn't have time to recoup because of manning levels and operational deployment responsibilities. So, with that, pull up the article here and just kind of go over it a little bit. The reason I knew about this article is actually because of a submarine group that I'm a part of. One of the guys there shared this article and was a little didn't understand the numbers, and frankly, I haven't had much time to go much more into detail than reading the full article myself. But here we go. The crusty salts in the Navy would often say that sailors belong on ships and ships belong at sea. It's no secret that sailors are busier than ever, especially those who are on sea duty. Still, the reality of how much time an individual sailor spends away from home might surprise you. Sailors based in Japan, for example, may not spend any more time away from their home port than sailors that are based in ships back on the east and west coast of the United States. But those based in Rota, Spain do spend a lot more time. That last little bit I'm paraphrasing, as you can read. And here it's saying submariners overall spend far less time away than sailors in the surface fleet do. And that strikes me as odd um, as much as it does many other people. Submarines often go out to sea, and sometimes you get extended. I got extended a couple times underway myself because another ship was broke down or couldn't leave the pier right away, so we had to go out and cover their assignment. Sucks an extra week or two. One time it was a month, I think, but still, you know, having to do all that can wear on a sailor, can wear on any sailor. Now, granted, I was doing this in the early 2000s, so things have changed since I was last in. Um, without looking at the actual what ships are in the yards, what ships are not in the yards, how many ships versus how many are active, things like that, all factor into how much time submariners are out to sea. Also, due to the nature of submarine tours are actually classified. You never know exactly how long one is in or how long one is out until after the mission is complete and after they've come back. And aviators are typically extremely busy, especially those who operate the Navy's mine hunting helicopters and carrier onboard delivery C-2 Greyhounds. Operational tempo is a term under the Department of Defense microscope after two fatal ship collisions that killed a total of 17 sailors last summer, is a separate measure that does not take into account the entire time a sailor spends away from home. Personnel tempo, or PERS tempo, on the other hand, measures the numbers of days each sailor spends away from their home port on official Navy business. The moment a sailor leaves a home port, the PERS tempo clock starts. Now, again, the whole point of this article is actually the PERS tempo because they're breaking down individual sailors. Well, not individual sailors, but individual classification of sailors. The data allows the Navy to monitor how much time sailors are spending away from their home port, away from their families, says Lieutenant Commander Daniel Dade, Navy spokesman at the Pentagon. This data allows us to ensure proper compensation to the sailors who spend more than 220 consecutive days in deployed status. The Navy Times attained the last 3 years, the last 3 fiscal years, fiscal 15, 16, and 17, of PERS tempo data for the entire Navy from the Navy Personnel Command. That information was broken down by individual commands. Navy officials stress that PERS tempo data is more about individual sailors than unit operational tempo. They do admit there is some overlap. That overlap comes in the fact that I could be, if I were still in, I could be TDY'd or TAD'd to another unit. Say my ship is in the yards and I'm reporting new to a pre-commissioned unit of a Virginia class. Well, they want me to, before we go out to sea, be up to date on it and requalified. I'm doing the air quotes here. They want me to be requalified. They will send me out to another ship, another submarine that's out to sea, so I can learn the systems. Now, the thing is, I could also be TAD to another school that's clear across the country. That should all, my understanding of what they're saying here is that's also considered deployed from my home port. So that's where kind of the overlap can occur. Is that maybe my sub is in the yards for quick overhaul, maybe it's in the yards for an upkeep really quick, whatever. Those things are factored into. I may go out to sea, but the unit will not go out to sea. Those types of things. Um, According to Day, the data could be skewed by people who detach and reported during a specific time frame. Individuals who may cross deck to another command during an extended maintenance period. Again, what I just said. But Navy officials would not say how much of the data would be skewed or in what direction. What what was provided was that what was provided is what the fleet reported to MPC, a source familiar to the data collection process. It's a requirement for commands to report the data about their people, and we trust that the commands are doing what's required of them. So, again, this is all based upon the command's honor, if you will, and air quotes around honor, that they are doing what's required of them. I'm not saying there are commands out there that would fudge the numbers, but we are all human, and sometimes things look bad for us. We try to hide those things. It's what it is. It's what we do as humans. Or if you're a Star Trek fan, what the Ferengis would call humans. Sorry. Military, Star Trek, it goes hand in hand. All right. So I'm going to skip down to what the data shows. Data provides spans of sailors from 221 ships and submarines and 121 aviation squadrons. According to the numbers from Navy Personnel Command, sailors stationed on surface ships spent an average of 23% of their time away from home. Submariners spent 15% of their time away from home, and shipmates in aviation squadron of all aircraft types were gone 23% of the time. That's where things get a little weird. Submarines going out all the time. So what we need to know is how many active submarines we have out that are out to sea and whatnot, and how many are. Why is that highlighted? Oh well. We ended. So what we end up having to do is we just how do I put it? We have to figure out what submarines are in port, what are not. How many have been decommed and are no longer part of this, and how many are um, just in the shipyards? Because the way this sounds is that with Ohio class submarines, both the GN and BN, SSGN and SSBN, they're two crew systems to maximize how much time the submarine is out to sea. Now, granted, it's one crew on, one crew off, but still, I guess with the two crew system, it fudges the numbers a bit more, maybe. Um, Now that I sit here and think about it, because it's not just the submarine going out to sea; it's the crew, and just because the gold crew goes out doesn't mean the blue crew gets credit for time at sea, and vice versa. And on the fast attack submarines, where you have one crew, they do try to limit the amount of time that they go out to sea for extended periods of time, but they still have West packs and med runs and all that other stuff that they do. So, you know, where are those 6-month deployments? How many submarines are going out on, 6+ month deployments? That's what I'd like to know. Again, it's all classified, so I can't necessarily get that information, but take, take a look at it. Total number of 25 commands had a PERS tempo that topped the 33% mark, meaning that on average, these sailors were gone for a whole year over the course of 3. The list obtained by the Navy Times contains 4 aircraft carriers and 12 carrier-based helo groups and fixed-wing squadrons, 8 guided missile destroyers, 1 guided missile cruiser, 3 amphibious ships, 1 attack submarine, 2 guided missile submarines, and 3 patrol squadrons. That that is where the numbers are skewed. Sorry. The numbers are skewed in this way because of the fact that they're only using 3 submarines. 3 total submarines. Now that attack submarine could have spent 6 months in a dry dock being refitted. It could have spent a year or 2 in the yards. We don't know. The 2 guided missile submarines, is it just one? Are they counting it all as one crew, or are they counting it all as separate crews? What do they call it? What do they classify as home port? Do they classify, I know for the Michigan that's forward deployed out of Guam, but its home port is here in Silverdale at Bangor, in the States. So it's like, how do you really fairly base 15% on 3 submarines? It is what it is. When looking at the forward deployed sailors in Japan, PERS tempo shows that those assigned to the Yokosuka-based cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and command ship were away from their home port 23% of the time compared to the 24% of the time that their U.S. counterparts were away. 1%, not a big difference. In layman's terms, Japan and U.S.-based sailors are in a near-dead heat in terms of time spent away from home. The 7th Fleet destroyers Fitzgerald and McCain were involved in last year's summer. Fatal collisions had reported PERS tempo numbers during the 3-year span of 32% and 30% respectively. Of the destroyers based in Japan, the Fitz and McCain were among the 3 busiest, the data shows. Overall, destroyer sailors at uh, FDNF Japan were reported to be away from home 24% of the time, an identical number to the rest of the Navy's destroyers. On the other side of the world, however, the sailors aboard the FDNF ships based in Rota, Spain, were shown to be the busiest during the 3-year span, reported 35% of the time spent away from home. That's 10% busier. That's 10% busier than anywhere else. And all right, excuse me, sorry. And the Navy destroyers continued to prove that they're the real workhorses of the surface navy. Purse Tempo's data shows that sailors from 18 destroyers were away on average 30% or more of the time. One destroyer, the Norfolk-based Ramage, was reported being away from the home port 45% of the time over the past 3 years, so nearly gone 18 months. That's the highest in the Navy over that time. Ramage also provides the best example of the difference between personnel and operational tempo. Although the sailors aboard the Ramage were working up and during were deployed during the last 3 years, the Purse Tempo data captured this ship's 6-month maintenance period that spent in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So right there, being in a maintenance period in a place other than your home port can add up. Counter to the increasingly active destroyer sailors aboard cruisers were reportedly away from home on average 22%. The Japanese-based cruisers, meanwhile, reported sailors only being away 20% of the time. The Monterey and Anzio were the only cruisers to report sailors being away from home more than 30% of the time during the past 3 years. Cruiser-based sailors, however, weren't operating as much as their destroyer brethren during the 3-year span because a number of the cruisers were undergoing modernization programs, a factor that most likely lowered the PERS tempo. It's reasonable to expect once modernization is complete, PERS tempo for these sailors will increase. All right, so here's the graph. I'm assuming that these are all the ships that they were able to get a hold of. Great, and they put them in order of deployment. Nimitz being 35% of the way, Ramage 45% away, but we know Ramage was due to upkeep. Monterey and Anzio, Leyte Gulf, that doesn't surprise me. Amphibious assault ships, Essex, doesn't surprise me. Arlington, I actually follow the Navy PR page there. They send me emails every day about pictures going on around the Navy. Pretty cool. In the Gator Navy, sailors aboard the amphibious ships are away over. Wow. In the Gator Navy, sailors aboard amphibious ships are away a reported 24% of the time. The busiest amphib sailors in the group are from the amphibious assault ship Essex, which reported its crew being away from home port 39% of the time. One amphibious transport dock ship, the Arlington, and 3 dock landing ships, Carter Hall, the Comstock, and Fort McHenry, round out the units reporting above 30%. Here we go. Oh, they got more. They got more than just one. Here's the breakdown of the ships. Oh, Dave, you'll be happy to know when you watch this. USS Michigan SSGN 727 Gold was away 31% of their time. But the Florida Blue led the way, followed by the Georgia Blue, Nebraska Blue, and then Alabama Blue as far as crews. So it's nice to know that they are counting crews. All right. All right, let's see here. Topic of the submarine community, reported PERS tempo numbers on the surface may seem low in comparison to the rest of the Navy. Missile boats report a 16% PERS tempo. And well, missile boats reported a 16% PERS tempo, 1 point higher than their attack shipmates. That makes no sense looking at the numbers I'm looking at here. Submarine officials say it's tough to compare data to their surface counterparts, however, because subs train and deploy on 18-month cycles compared to the 36-month cycles used by the surface Navy. Furthermore, officials say that submarines don't generally report PERS tempo data into the system used by the Navy because of the limited network access. Instead, submarine reports are completed in a catch-up mode upon returning to their home ports. Sailors, so So the information's not entirely accurate, is what they're saying. Sailors and aviation units, meanwhile, are among the busiest in the Navy, combining to spend a reported 23% of the time away from home port. Carrier-based helicopters. What's the difference between carrier-based helicopter HSM and all right? Okay, must be one must be personnel or supply. Yeah. So HSM 70 is away 35.62% of the time, while HSC 84 was away 33.97% of the time. Not even a full percentage point. Well, actually, a little bit more than a full percentage point, but still, no, not like two. So it's negligible there as well. Just really great information here. Carrier strike teams, VFAs, the VAQs for electronic warfare, radar interceptors, things like that. Wow, 43% of the time, almost 44% of the time for the carrier strike teams, almost 36% of the time for electronic warfare, and identical for the patrol squadron. That's very interesting. Anyways, that's that's the point about the Navy that I want to make is just basically even the reporter makes it seem sensational at first, but yet it's not entirely as accurate as he's trying to make it sound. How the Navy Times is trying to make it sound. They're trying to make it sound like surface ships are all out to sea more, but they don't see that. How do I want to put it? Because submarines don't have the same network access that the ships do, especially the carriers. They don't. They can't load up their information the same way that the surface ships do. The same way that the carriers do. Sorry about that. And we have to accept that for what it is that we're never going to truly know the purse tempo of a submarine and its crews, because for all we know, the graph showing that SSGN 727 gold could be trumped by the new data coming in from the SSBN 727 blue. We don't know, but I'll let Dave have this one, so no big deal. I want to move on to now the bill signed by Governor Scott. I have not read into it because he just signed it yesterday. It's Florida Senate Bill 7026, the first gun control legislation enacted in the state after the Parkland school massacre. I'm reading this from CNN, so conservatives, please do not bash me for this. Just understand that I'm reading what this has to say, and I will go over to Fox News in a bit. Okay? The law is known as the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. It tightens gun control in several ways, but allows some teachers to be armed. Now, I know there are those of you that are going to be like, oh no, we can't be arming teachers. I see the point in doing this. I really do, because it's more to be used as a deterrent, much like the ballistic missile submarines of the nuclear triad, the nuclear triad, the silos, the airplanes, and the submarines. You don't launch your nukes at us, we won't launch our nukes at you, and we just stalemate each other. That's kind of what they're trying to do here with this allowing teachers to be armed. So, when Scott signed this, he was surrounded by the families of the victims recounting grief visited on his state in the aftermath of the Valentine's Day carnage at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and in the 2016 shootings at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando and the Fort Lauderdale airport. It, it is how do I put this? It's nice that it wasn't knee-jerk reaction to all of the events that have happened that they've been kind of thinking about, but this is one too many. But it's still kind of a knee-jerk reaction. One of the provisions is that the state law raises the minimum age to from 21 to buy a firearm, or from 18 to let me rephrase that. It raises the minimum age from 18 to buy a firearm to 21. So I don't know how it's going to work in Florida, but I guess now you can go buy beer and a gun on your 21st birthday. That's not a good combination. All right. So the National Rifle Association immediately filed a lawsuit against Florida, saying that the age minimum in the section of the law violates the Second and the 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. The NRA argues that people who are 18 years old are considered adults for almost all purposes, and certainly for purposes of exercising fundamental constitutional rights. The NRA has one right here. And I have nothing against the NRA, honestly, I don't. But again, if you're looking at it from a constitutional standpoint, the Second Amendment says that although the Second Amendment says the federal government doesn't have the right to prohibit it, doesn't, as far as I'm aware, and I think they've covered this a couple weeks ago, that the states have not been binded into any sort of limits on the Second Amendment. They're not incorporated. That's the word I'm looking for. They haven't been incorporated into the Second Amendment yet. That'll be interesting to see if that holds up. They also bring up the point, though, that 18-year-olds are, for all intents and purposes, able to do everything an adult can that's over the age of 21, minus drinking, or in states like Washington and Colorado, would that have a limit of 21 for weed, marijuana, whatever you want to call it. And that's understandable. However, I can also understand why you would want to put a limit. And it's not so much that you're trying to prohibit people from buying guns. You know, look at what the military can do to people that are 18 years old that come back from war. Yeah, they know how to be safe with guns, but are they all right upstairs? I mean, some people develop post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress syndrome. And, do you really want those people having a gun? I'm not saying that they shouldn't be able to, but I think that they should be tested. And to be honest, I could see maybe making an exception to this. Instead of saying from 18 to 21, it's provisionally age 21, but if you're 18 and you can show that you are mentally competent enough to do it, and if you have a history of being able to show firearm safety or take a firearm safety course. I mean, many states that have hunting, that allow hunting, actually have a requirement for children and adults to go through a hunter safety course. Why not have something like that prior to purchasing a gun? You can't purchase a gun until you can prove that you've actually completed a course. So, just quick thoughts on that. The organization also contends that federal law already prevents many Americans 21 or younger from buying certain types of guns. Scott received a $400 million bill Thursday following the days of impassioned and often contentious debate in the majority Republican House and Senate. He praised the legislature in its quick action for what he calls the inefficiency of the federal government in Washington. All right. That's it. This is where people have an issue with CNN and other media outsources that are more liberal than others. They report stories, and yes, while they were reporting the words of a governor, they report it as if the governor's word is a total understanding of how the Constitution works. Like, oh, he's been elected to office, he knows exactly how the federal government's supposed to work. That is not that is not the case. I'm studying the Constitution. I'm reading up on the Constitution. Doesn't mean I'm an expert on the Constitution. Heck, I'm sure Dave would even consider himself not an expert on the Constitution. Might be a fan of the Constitution, might want to know more about the Constitution, but he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand the full Constitution. And you have to get through the fact that what people call inefficiency, and again, air quote around inefficiency, of the federal government is not necessarily inefficiency. It's not like they're trying to represent one state or one region. They're trying to represent the nation as a whole. When was the last time you tried to agree on something with, 50 other people, one from each state, trying to decide how to pay for something? Oh, you haven't? Oh, well, no big deal then, huh? Guess you can't call them out on that. A controversial new part of the new law is known as the Coach Aaron Feist Guardian Program, which arms some teachers of if both the local school district and local sheriff's department agree. Again, it's not just teachers can all of a sudden start bringing guns to school. They have to get permission from the school district and the local sheriff's department. I'm sure there's going to be training involved for those that want to do it. The $67 million provision is named after the coach who shielded his students with his own body and died in last month's shooting. And the governor favors that the decision is made locally by the school district and the sheriff's office locally. And I think that if they are going to do that, that is a very good idea because it's still law enforcement's job. But having somebody who's also been trained and volunteers to do this, again, volunteers to do this is important. It, it's one of those things that just because you can carry a gun doesn't mean you should carry a gun in certain situations. There's certain places where you shouldn't need to carry a gun. And yes, there are places where guns having a gun on you can help save you. I mean, just look at the video showing the older gentleman who saved an internet cafe from being robbed, things like that. There are times and places for being able to carry, but not everywhere at all times because odds are you're never going to need to use it. Are you? No, it's a deterrent. I understand. I get it. I'm not trying to be hypocritical here. I'm just saying that think about the situation you're in and do you really need to? The whole, oh, creating gun-free zones makes it easier for people to come in and shoot people. Just look at the last issue here of Parkland. Sure. And what happens when you start allowing people just to randomly bring weapons in? Well, if you're not going to check them or make sure that they're authorized to have their gun there, then what's going to prevent something like this from happening again? Especially if somebody has a death wish of their own, they've been picked on, bullied, and beaten, and all of a sudden they're like, "Screw it! I know that these people are carrying weapons in the school to protect the other students. I might as well take a few people with me." Come on, really? I mean, so honestly, what's the thought process there? Not, I agree. People who volunteer should be armed. They go through training. That's fine. So that way they don't impact negatively the police from doing their job, the sheriff's office from doing their jobs. That's what we need to do. That's what states need to decide, not the federal government. And I'm sorry, but we need to have better gun control laws in the sense that we need to keep people who have mental health issues from owning those weapons, especially if there's a potential that they could cause harm to others. So, moving on. Counties have opted out of the provision to arm teachers could redirect those funds to hire more school officers if they do not, again, if counties opt out of arming their own teachers. And addressing the students, Scott has said to the students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, "You've made your voices heard. You didn't let up and you fought until there was change." After the bill signing, U.S. United Airlines captain Tony Montello, whose daughter Gina Rose died in the school shooting, read a statement on behalf of the victims, and that's victims, plural possessive, families. When it comes to preventing future acts of horrific school violence, this is the beginning of the journey, the statement said. We've all paid a terrible price for the progress. Call we can call on more states to follow Florida's lead and create meaningful legislation to make all schools safer. Again, it's not a matter of making schools safer by introducing more weapons into it, or is it necessarily banning weapons? Because again, I understand the point. If you make a gun-free zone, what's to prevent people who don't want to follow the rule from not following the rule? There's nothing. So, what are we going to do to do this? That's that's the thing. We got to figure that out. All right. So now that I've read through what I wanted to read through on the CNN side of things, and just so you're all aware, this is Saturday, March 10th at 11:35 a.m. Pacific time. I am aware that there was a gun standoff in California. I am waiting until there's more information about that before I'm going to talk about it. So, all right. Trying to find the Fox News because it's not a video about this. All right. All right. So they don't have it right there on the side. That's the gun control bill would have more to it than that. All right. So let's go to politics then. Politics might be in the also be in the U.S., but still. All right. And just so also aware, Trump's meeting with Kim Jong Kim Jong Un, yeah, Kim Jong Un, meeting for May is the first time that a president has accepted the offer. It's not the first time that one has happened. All right. And Justice Department is proposing a ban on rapid fire bump stocks. I'm just trying to keep from dead silence. All right. Here we go. Might as well go with that. NRA files lawsuit saying Florida's gun bill violates the Second Amendment. And showing that their Twitter account at NRA, the NRA has filed a lawsuit challenging Florida's newly enacted ban on the purchase of firearms by adults between the ages of 18 and 21. It is an affront to hashtag 2A. It's as it totally eviscerates the hashtag 2A rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms. Hashtag defend the Second Amendment. Or defend the Second, sorry. All right. In this article, and this is the only one I've been able to find so far, I mean, I've scrolled through a bit more, is basically just rehashing what CNN kind of glossed over, is that the excuse me, that the ben, that the raising the minimum age is a violation of Second Amendment rights of 18 to 21-year-olds. And let's see here. The bill signed by Governor Scott raises the minimum age to buy rifles from 18 to 21 and extends a 3-day waiting period for handgun purchases to include long guns and bans bump stocks. Okay with that. Attachments that enable semi-automatic rifles to fire at speed of fully automatic ones. Such bump stocks were used in a recent gun massacre in Las Vegas, which several people died. The bill did appeal to Republicans with the inclusion of a provision that enabled teachers and other school employees to carry handguns, something President Trump was passionate about immediately following the Valentine's Day shooting. So again, the 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 whole point of this the whole point of this issue is not that the whole point of the issue that the NRA is having is not so much that the gun control in the sense of preventing some people. It's the fact that they see it as a prevention of all people from the ages of 18 to 21, which it is. It's not, um, it's not an issue. It's not an issue. It's not that it's not an issue. It is an issue. It's. I want to know what the NRA's position is on the. I want to know what the issue is on the NRA's issue or position on the issue of gun control really is. Are they okay with limitations or screenings, such as a mental health screening? Do you really want to have somebody who's mentally not all there having a gun, firing on people? You know, those, I don't have a problem with them if they seek the help and they can get approved by a doctor, a psychiatrist, or a psychologist. That's fine. But at the same time, we need to know what the NRA's position is on it. We also need to know what their position is on background checks. And I'm pretty sure I know their position on this one. Honestly, I think that every person buying a gun, whether through a dealer or private seller, from me to you, you to me, whatever, needs to go through a background check, no matter what. Not that difficult. Include it in the price of the purchase of the gun. How hard is that? I know some gun dealers that come through my work that actually agreed with me on that. If I'm if they're gonna sell me a gun as a dealer, they're gonna do a background check on me. If I'm gonna sell a gun to one of them personally, I should want to do a background check on them. Just because 'cause they're a licensed arm dealer doesn't mean that I should trust them personally. Or if I'm gonna sell it to my best friend who lives down the road, do I really want them to have a gun if I know that they aren't capable? Why should I sell them the gun? So on and so forth. I'm going through the, US side of the Fox News, and so far nothing on it is, about the new bill. They have a video though that shows Parkland School shooting 911 calls released, okay? Yep. Alright, so that's kinda where I'm gonna go with this for the week. I'll Again, I'm trying to do mostly the topical stuff of the week, but I also wanna get to local stuff as well. So that's why, even though this is national with Florida news, it's still an issue in Florida. It's still it's their business, just much like our public corrections bill that I did the last 2 weeks here for Washington is an issue for Washingtonians, but it should also be concerning to other people in other states. So please take a moment, go out and look at what's going on in your area. Let me know if there's something you want me to cover. Jay's Politics Podcast at gmail.com. Send me a link. Send me a link on Twitter. J Poly Podcast. That's my handle at J Poly Podcast. You know, we we all want to. The whole point of me doing this is I want to provide the information that I can get. I also want to provide you with my opinion, but I also don't want it to be just about my opinion. I want to hear your opinion on it as well. Do you agree that, with the Navy, specifically that topic, do you agree that we should either bump up manning so we can have more people, more crews to split the load, or do we cut down on the number of long deployments and cycle everybody out, 3 months at a time or whatever? Things like that. We have to help our government figure out how we want to spend our military budget, not just have them dictate to us our military budget and what we're spending it on. As far as issues of gun control, just because this is happening in Florida doesn't mean it's not going to be an issue here in Washington for me, or if it's going to be an issue in Minnesota for my family, or Maine, or Texas even. I doubt it'll ever come to Texas, but it could. That's the point of the issue is, these are all topics that we need to look at as a society as a whole. We need to know what it is. So, with that, I'm going to say adieu, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye, and I'm just going to ask that you guys enjoy your weekend. I know this isn't the usual time that I do because I have to work later today. So, this one, the Saturday show is always going to be flexible. It's either going to be before I go to work or it'll be after I go to work, whichever one happens to be the case. So, with that, thank you. This has been Jay's Politics Podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. Check us out at podcast99.org, or you can check us out on Facebook at Politics at Podcast 99 Network. Yeah, sorry. Space there for a moment. Have a wonderful weekend.